West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
This story by the Brazilian author Paulo Coelho tells of two Englishmen crossing the desert where they meet a family. When they ask them for shelter, they are welcomed with radical hospitality. A story told by Paulo Coelho. Paulo Coelho. I knew I would mess that up, but it's a good story. Two Englishmen were crossing the desert when they saw a tent and asked the family for shelter. Even though the family did not know them, they welcomed them in the way that the conduct of nomads dictates. A camel was killed and its meat served in a sumptuous dinner. The next day, as the guests were still there, the family had another camel killed. Astonished, the guests protested that they'd not finished eating the one killed the day before. "It would be a disgrace to serve old meat to my guests," was the answer. On the third day, the two strangers woke early and decided to continue on their journey. As the man was not at home, they gave his wife 100 dinars, apologizing for not being able to wait because if they spent any more time there, the sun would become too hot for them to travel. They traveled for about 4 hours when they heard a voice calling out to them. They looked back and saw the man following them. As soon as he caught up with them, he threw the money on the ground. "I gave you such a warm welcome. Aren't you ashamed of yourselves?" In surprise, the stranger said that the camels were surely worth more than that, but that they didn't have much money. "I'm not talking about the amount," was the answer. "The desert welcomes us wherever we go and never asks anything in return. If we had to pay, how could we live? Welcoming you to my tent is like paying back a fraction of what life has given us." Offered as wisdom for the journey. This poem by Mitra Ramprasad is a celebration of hospitality. Hospitality reveals humanity. It shows compassion. Hospitality is the very stuff of life. Hospitality by Mitra Ramprasad. Hospitality shows humanity. In its bare essence of waves of compassion, in colours of goodwill and amity, on rolling ripples of life's vast ocean. Hospitality shows cordiality on its loving face at all given times, sharing its genuine geniality, shying away from making proud proclaims. Hospitality shows conviviality, giving no excuse or explanation, showing the very soul of sociability while doing the loving salutation, offered as wisdom for the journey. And this final short poem by Ambrose Bierce cuts to the real meaning of hospitality. This means welcoming the stranger. It's not a chance to show off your wine cellar. Hospitality by Ambrose Bierce. Why ask me, gastragogue, to dine, unless to praise your rascal wine? Yet never ask some luckless sinner who needs, as I do not, a dinner. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk in its light.
I genuinely believe that hospitality can transform the world. The rhapsodic poem by Matthieu Ramprasad beautifully expresses the potential of hospitality. Hospitality reveals humanity, the waves of compassion, your colors of goodwill, the rolling ripples of life's vast oceans. Hospitality needs no excuse or explanation. Hospitality is a path to healing a broken world. There is so much suffering and division in this web of life. We are divided by race and class and gender. The gap between the rich and poor is growing as we live in times of record inflation and record corporate profits. And if we're going to discover how hospitality might transform the world, we need to look a bit at the deeper meaning of hospitality. When you do a Google search for hospitality, you're presented with images of the hospitality industry. That is the hotel and restaurant industry. Hotels will offer you a warm bed and a hot bath, as long as you have a credit card. It's a business transaction, and that's not real hospitality. And there's nothing really wrong with it, going to a hotel or having that as a business. It's just not actually hospitality, despite what they call themselves. It falls short of the meaning of what's in the word hospitality. Another understanding of hospitality is spending time with friends and family. But this isn't really hospitality either. Even criminals do that. Inviting friends over for a sumptuous dinner is a good thing. Sharing a meal with loved ones feeds us as human beings. It helps us be better people. It strengthens our relationship and even strengthens the web of life. It's not nothing, but it's also not hospitality. And that Ambrose Bierce poem that we just heard in only 26 words shows why it isn't really hospitality. Bierce is fairly cynical when he accuses his acquaintance of inviting him over just to show off his wine. But he hits the nail squarely on the head when he asks, why don't you ask someone to dinner who actually needs a meal? Because, you see, there is a hostility in hospitality. Hospitality is one of those words or concepts that have a meaning beneath the meaning. If we scrape away at the surface of the hospitality, if we stretch its meaning and practice, we can open up new ways of being, new ways of participating in the salvation of the world. Because when we look closely, we find that the very word hospitality comes from the roots hostis and posse. Posse means power. In this case, that means to have the disposition of the place of welcome. I can invite people into my home if I choose. I have that power. But we've already seen that there's something more is required for hospitality. And the reason for that is that welcoming my friends to my home does not include hostis. For true hospitality, I can only invite the stranger into my home. Because that's what hostis means. Stranger or alien or even hostile. And in fact, hospitality is the same root as the word as hostile. And that's what I mean when I say there is a hostility in hospitality. It's the act of inviting the stranger, the alien, the hostile into my home that embraces radical hospitality we are looking for. And that Paulo Coelho story about the travelers across the desert is a beautiful example of the kind of hospitality I'm speaking of. The challenges in crossing a desert are legion. You must be careful to ensure you have enough water. You can only travel when the sun is not too hot. But also it's dangerous at night as well. You can freeze to death in Death Valley in the Mojave Desert. The desert is a hostile place. And the desert dwellers from the story realize that. They show their deep understanding with their radical hospitality. They know how hard it is to live in the desert, and so they practice this radical hospitality, welcoming strangers, aliens, into their home and offering them the best meal they can, because they know they are dependent on hospitality as well. Hospitality is not a transaction. No, hospitality is a gift. It's welcoming the stranger. It's surrendering your power to the hostile. But even as I call for a radical hospitality, I understand there's limits to what we can do. I know many women ministers who have lived in rural areas, and they would not answer their door after dark. And I don't blame them. Sometimes we just need to create a safe place for ourselves. And in fact, this kind of hospitality I'm calling for seems impractical. It even seems impossible. If I invite the unknown, hostile person to my home, I'm risking my health and well-being. There is an embedded risk in hospitality, but you cannot eliminate the risk without eliminating the possibility. But this level of hospitality is more than just impractical, it's impossible. But what I'm saying is the power of the hospitality lies in the impossibility of the hospitality. And so we must do so by embracing hospitality as a response to the impossible pain in this world. By practicing this hospitality, this impossible, desperate hospitality we heard in the Paul Coelho story, we can create cracks in the intractable, impossible problems facing humanity and indeed the entire web of life. Radical hospitality is part of an effective response to the impossible pain of the world. But how would this work? How can hospitality really affect change? And I think a metaphor that we might see is how that might work is the way that water, just simple water, can erode rock. If we think of a mass of rock and we imagine it's indestructible, that it's there forever, that it's eternal. But there are cracks in this rock, spaces for transformation. And what happens is that water seeps into the cracks and freezes. And when water freezes, it expands and it widens the crack just a little. And then it melts and it seeps even further into the cracks. And when it freezes again, it widens the cracks a little more. And this repeated process eventually can lead to the destruction of the rock. And maybe it can be a metaphor that can lead to the destruction of our intractable problems. We can think of radical hospitality like this, as something seeping into the cracks of the seeming impossible problems we face as a community and as a world, widening these cracks over and over again until the injustices of the world come tumbling down and we can have a healing world. And so whatever we journey on here at West Hill United, a radical, impossibility of hospitality needs to be part of our lives. And through this impossible radical hospitality, we can be participants in the healing of the world. Peace.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.